In Squid Game, breaking the rules usually means one thing: death. But somehow, certain players manage to bend or completely shatter the system's regulations and live to tell about it. From clever manipulators who found loopholes to desperate contestants willing to risk everything, these survivors prove that sometimes the most dangerous game is the one played outside the official rules. Let's break down the most shocking moments when players gambled with the system itself, starting with perhaps the most brazen rule breaker of them all. When Hwang In-ho, the frontman, infiltrated the 2024 Squid Game as player 001, he committed perhaps the most audacious rule violation in the entire series. Despite being the game's administrator, In-ho deliberately disguised himself as a contestant, a direct breach of the separation between players and staff that formed one of the fundamental pillars of the game's structure. What made this infiltration particularly shocking was how the frontman navigated the game's deadly challenges while maintaining his cover. Throughout Season 2, we watched as In-ho projected a kind, almost fatherly persona, winning the trust of other players, including our protagonist Song Gi-hun. While the other players faced genuine mortal danger, In-ho participated with the safety net of his true identity. The most flagrant violation came during the voting sessions. As the game's administrator posing as a player, In-ho had inside knowledge that gave him unprecedented influence over group decisions. He strategically guided votes to serve the game's entertainment value rather than his supposed team's survival, manipulating outcomes from within. Yet despite breaking this massive boundary between administrator and contestant, In-ho faced no consequences. His immunity stemmed directly from his position of power. He was literally above the rules he enforced with lethal precision on others. This remarkable exception highlights the stark hypocrisy at the heart of the games. What's most telling about this rule breaking is how it reveals the true nature of the game's power structure. The frontman's infiltration demonstrates that the rules were never about fairness, but control. Those who created the system could violate it at will, while participants faced death for the slightest infraction. It's the ultimate example of how in Squid Game, just as in the outside world it critiques, rules primarily exist to maintain power hierarchies rather than ensure justice. The organ harvesting conspiracy might be one of the most disturbing examples of rule-breaking we've seen in Squid Game. Remember player 111, the doctor from Season 1? This guy wasn't just trying to win the games. He was literally cutting deals with the corrupt guards by cutting up bodies. While everyone else was sleeping in those creepy bunk beds, the doctor was performing back alley surgeries on dead contestants, harvesting their organs in exchange for advanced knowledge about the games. Talk about playing dirty. What made this scheme so terrifying wasn't just the gruesome operations, it was how effectively it worked. When it came time for the honeycomb challenge, notice how the doctor immediately chose the umbrella shape? That's because he already knew what was coming, while other players picked random shapes and died horrific deaths. This rule breaker calmly selected the most difficult shape, knowing he had the skills to complete it. His insider knowledge gave him a massive advantage that sent dozens of uninformed players to their deaths. The most chilling part is how long this operation continued right under everyone's noses. For multiple games, the doctor survived through his illegal advantage, while countless others died without ever realizing the game was rigged. The guards were smuggling him information at night, creating a system that completely undermined the supposed equal opportunity that the frontman and VIPs loved to preach about. When the frontman finally discovered what was happening, his reaction tells us everything about which rules actually matter in Squid Game. Did you notice how he lined up those guards and executed them on the spot? It wasn't the organ harvesting that outraged him. It was the threat to his precious illusion of fairness. The message couldn't be clearer. Brutality is acceptable, but exposing the game's hypocrisy is not. The doctor's temporary survival through rule breaking proves something crucial about Squid Game. It's never really been about merit or fairness. Those willing to exploit others and break the rules often gain the upper hand, at least until they're no longer useful. Remember that shocking tug-of-war match from Season 1? It's the perfect example of how breaking unwritten rules can save your life in Squid Game. When Oh Il-nam's team, with Gi-hun, Sang-woo, and Ali, faced off against a team of muscular men, they should have been dead within seconds. I mean, look at the matchup. A frail old man, a gambling addict, a white-collar criminal, and Ali against a team that looked like they bench-pressed trucks for fun. But somehow, this unlikely team pulled off what seemed impossible. The genius rule-bending came from Il-nam himself. When everyone expected brute strength to win the day, he introduced a completely different approach. It's not about strength, the old man explained, demonstrating his unconventional strategy of leaning backwards instead of pulling forward. Did you notice how the other team was completely thrown off by this? They expected a straightforward strength contest, but Il-nam's team changed the entire nature of the game. What makes this rule-breaking so fascinating is that technically they didn't violate any written rules. The frontman never specified how players had to pull the rope, only that the losing team would fall to their deaths. But Il-nam's strategy completely violated the spirit of the game. Tug-of-war has been played one way for centuries, and this team essentially created a new version on the spot. The most brilliant part? The frontman and VIPs couldn't do anything about it. Unlike the doctor's organ harvesting, this clever exploitation existed in a gray area that even the game's administrators couldn't punish. When the opposing team started sliding toward the edge, you could almost feel the VIP's shock at seeing the expected outcome completely reversed. This rule-bending moment teaches us something crucial about Squid Game. Sometimes survival depends not on following rules blindly, but recognizing which ones can be reinterpreted. While other contestants died playing the game as expected, Il-nam's team survived by fundamentally reimagining what the game could be. It's a perfect example of how thinking outside the box, quite literally, can be the difference between life and death. The marble game from Season 1 might be the most heartbreaking example of rule-breaking we've ever seen in Squid Game. When the players were told to pair up, they thought they'd be playing together against other teams. Instead, they were forced to play against their partners, a cruel twist that turned friends into opponents. But some players managed to bend these rules in ways that kept them alive, even if it meant someone else had to die. Take Sang-woo and Ali's partnership. This has got to be one of the most devastating examples of rule manipulation in the entire series. When Ali was clearly winning their marble game, did you notice how Sang-woo completely changed the rules? Instead of accepting defeat, he convinced Ali they could both survive by hiding marbles around the arena. It was a complete lie, of course, but Ali trusted him completely. Sang-woo used this trust to secretly steal Ali's marbles, essentially creating his own game within the game, one where deception trumped the official rules of fair play. Then there's the old man, Il-nam, and his game with Gi-hun. Throughout their match, Il-nam pretended to be confused and forgetful, making Gi-hun feel guilty about taking advantage of his dementia. But as we later discovered, Il-nam was fully aware the entire time. He was manipulating Gi-hun's emotions, creating an unspoken rule that Gi-hun couldn't ethically exploit an elderly man's confusion, even though that's exactly what Il-nam was doing to him. What makes these alliance betrayals so powerful is how they violated the unwritten rules of human decency that existed even within the death game. The official rules said players had to win their marble games to survive, but they said nothing about how. These players survived by breaking the moral codes that bound them to their partners: trust, honesty, and compassion. The most chilling thing about these alliance betrayals, the game's administrators allowed them all. As long as someone ended up with all 10 marbles, the frontman didn't care how it happened. It shows something terrifying about Squid Game. Sometimes, breaking human bonds is the quickest way to survival. The voting system in Squid Game was supposed to be the one place where players had genuine power. a democratic process in a decidedly undemocratic death game. But as we've seen repeatedly, these votes became prime opportunities for some of the most consequential rule-breaking in the entire series. The most obvious example has to be the mass manipulation during the first vote in Season 1. Remember when player 001, who we later discovered was Ilnam himself, convinced everyone to continue the games after they'd voted to leave? This wasn't just persuasion. It was the game's creator literally rigging his own system when it didn't produce his desired outcome. And what about Dick Su's intimidation tactics during voting sessions? This gangster didn't just cast his vote, he threatened and coerced others into voting his way, effectively multiplying his influence. Did you notice how players would look at him nervously before raising their hands? He wasn't technically breaking written rules, but he was absolutely violating the spirit of equal votes that the frontman pretended to uphold. Season 2 took vote manipulation to new heights with Sono, the shaman who brainwashed multiple players into becoming her devoted followers. Her most significant manipulation came during the final voting session, when she convinced player 006 to change her vote from X to O, resulting in a tie that triggered the special game. This wasn't just one person influencing another. It was psychological manipulation that fundamentally altered the game's trajectory. What makes vote manipulation so fascinating is how it exposes the hollow nature of the game's supposed fairness. The frontman presented voting as sacred, yet contestants who manipulated the system faced no consequences. In fact, they were often rewarded with survival and advancement, suggesting that the game's true values weren't democracy or fairness, but power and influence, just like the outside world the game supposedly critiqued. The most disturbing revelation? When you look closely at who survived through vote manipulation. It's the same people who held power outside the games, the wealthy, the connected, and those willing to exploit others. Squid Game's message becomes crystal clear. Even in systems with supposedly fair rules, those who know how to manipulate them hold the real power. After examining all these rule breakers who managed to survive, a disturbing pattern emerges in the world of Squid Game. The players who lived longest weren't necessarily the strongest, fastest, or most skilled. They were the ones who understood which rules could be broken and which were truly sacred. In this brutal microcosm of society, survival often depended on knowing when to follow the rules and when to bend or break them entirely. What's most revealing is who tends to survive rule breaking. Notice how it's rarely the innocent or morally upright contestants who benefit from these violations. Instead, it's those who already possessed power or privilege in the outside world. The frontman with his authority, Sang-woo with his intelligence, and manipulators like Sono with their psychological tactics. The games claim to be an equalizer where everyone has the same chance. But rule breakers expose this as a cruel fiction. The frontman's selective enforcement tells us everything about the true nature of the games. Some violations, like the doctor's organ harvesting, are punished with immediate execution, while others, like smuggled items or vote manipulation, are overlooked or even silently encouraged. The difference? Entertainment value. Rules that preserve dramatic tension are enforced. Those that make for compelling viewing are flexible. It's no coincidence that the VIPs watch these games like reality television. The rules exist primarily to create spectacle, not fairness. This pattern reflects something profoundly disturbing about our own world. In society, we're taught that rules apply equally to everyone, yet we constantly see powerful individuals and institutions break them without consequence. Squid Game's rule breakers mirror this reality, showing how systems claiming to be meritocratic often reward those willing to exploit loopholes and violate norms. Looking ahead to Season 3, we should expect even more sophisticated rule breaking. As players become more familiar with the game's structure, they'll undoubtedly find new ways to manipulate the system. Will Gi-hun use his insider knowledge to break rules strategically? Will new alliances form specifically to exploit loopholes? One thing is certain. In Squid Game, just as in life, the written rules are only the beginning of understanding how to survive. The most important lesson these rule breakers teach us is this. In systems designed to be unfair, sometimes breaking the rules isn't just an advantage, it's the only way to survive. The question isn't whether rules will be broken in Squid Game, but who gets to break them and walk away unscathed.